Good morning, everyone. And I'd like to first start by thanking the organizers for putting together a great agenda. Certainly has grown in 3 years, and I'm going to certainly share some of my thoughts around rare disease. I looked at the agenda a little closer this morning, and what the agenda says is not at all what I'm going to talk about. But what I am going to talk about a little bit is about building a sustainable business in rare disease and what our approach to ensuring that the business is sustainable. When we think about sustainability in any business, right, there's really two key things that I think about. One is, is there a really unmet need? And the other is, can you make a reasonable return, and can you do both over time? And if you can do that over time as a key element, then you certainly can have a sustainable business. I think when you think about the first part, the unmet need, clearly there is a broad and acute unmet need in rare disease. I think we all are very well aware of what the numbers are in terms of the diseases and the high morbidity and mortality, the number that affect children because they're genetic in nature. So I think we're all aware of the unmet need. So I don't know that that's a really big hurdle in terms of building a sustainable business. The need's there. And I think, well, why pharma? Clearly pharma, the lifeblood of pharma is innovation. If we don't innovate, then we, over time, won't be a sustainable business in any area. As soon as we file a patent, the clock starts in terms of how long we can commercialize a medicine. So the time frame for pharma and the need to innovate is clearly very important. When we were at our year beginning meeting this year, our CEO brought kind of the senior leadership team together, and we talked about a lot of topics, but the foundational topic we talked about is really getting back to basics. What is our purpose? And our purpose, that we talked, it's on our website and so forth, and is really innovate to bring therapies to patients that significantly improve their lives. So that's not just rare disease, that's all areas. So clearly innovation to the unmet need is core to pharma's purpose, so there's a great match. I think the challenge is the ability to generate a reasonable return and do both of those, meet a need and generate a reasonable return in a way that builds confidence and trust with customers over the long term, and that's an important element. And you think about those two things, it's pretty basic in their core elements, but it has to really be both. If we only worry about a return and we don't innovate, over time our products will be commoditized. We really, competitors will fill in the gaps of where we really create value for customers, and investment shifts away. Therefore, we can't continue to create new investment. If we don't generate a return and we only innovate, then clearly investment's going to shift away from the rare disease space. So it has to be both. We can't obviously pick one. And if I think about the four, there's many key stakeholders for a pharma company. And from my point of view, if you think about four of the really key stakeholders, the number one, first and foremost, it has to start with is patients. And those two elements of need and return, patients, obviously have an unmet need. They don't want products that are already on the marketplace. They don't want new products that kind of replicate those products. And in the rare disease space, where there's so many areas that don't have a therapy, clearly it's not beneficial for the community for us to create therapies where there's already good products on the market, unless of course, they're innovative and improvement. Patients generally are willing to pay their fair share if you innovate, and future patients who are relying on that innovation from a therapy rely on that as well. So patients clearly need those two elements for us from a sustainability point of view. Payers are a second of our kind of core stakeholders, and payers are really the value gatekeepers. Payers keep us all honest from an innovation point of view. When payer looks at a treatment of a disease, they don't look at, what other drugs are on the market. They look at what other therapies are available. And how does your therapy differ from the other therapies available? And am I willing to pay for it? So if you're innovative, generally they'll pay for it, and therefore you can generate a return. So clearly payers need both. Employees, and I think about, it's kind of an odd question, but how many people here work for a living, right? Clearly all of us. And when we go to a job every day, we want to make a difference. We want to be part of something that's bigger than any of us. We really want to collectively bring together the efforts of our individuals and know collectively that all of us are kind of smarter than any of us and bring together new therapies. That's why those of us that were in the pharma industry, it's kind of our calling, our vocation. We want to make a difference. And in the rare disease space, I've been in pharma for about 15 years and about 8 years before that in consulting. And in the last 3 years, really focused on rare disease space, and nowhere have I felt closer to the patient and the need that the patient needs and the urgency that we need to have. When you talk to a patient, when you talk to a mother, a father of a patient, and you can see the time clock in their head, that creates a sense of urgency for us. So our employees want to be proud of what they do. They want it to be a great place to work. They want to contribute. So clearly, our employees over time need innovation, and they need to generate, meeting that need and generate a return. And last but not least are our shareholders. Shareholders own corporate, publicly held companies, and our shareholders. You think about companies that are known for innovation. Maybe Google comes to mind, or Apple, or there's many companies who innovate. Well, clearly they generate a return as well, and more investment goes into those companies. I think a pharma company is no different. If we can continue to innovate and bring new therapies to market with unmet need, we'll get a return, we'll get more investment, and therefore it creates a great cycle for us to even generate more research and development dollars into areas of unmet need. So there are at least, kind of the foundational of the building a sustainable business. So why Pfizer? I've read a lot of headlines, and I'm sure all of you have as well, around, big pharma is now in the rare disease business. And it's because the blockbuster model is drying up, or, that's where the future dollars are, or we're trying to de-risk using smaller indications, maybe like IPF or AAT, alpha-1 antitrypsin, for larger indications like COPD or asthma. But these aren't it. These aren't the reasons. I mean, Pfizer's been in the rare disease space for over a decade, and we've been more public about it and created a research unit a few years ago. But the reason is, one, I've already talked about our purpose of innovating to really improve patients' lives. And that is core to what we do. But the reason, because that's true across all areas though, but the reason is because the risk and benefit equation for rare disease relative to other disease areas is now on par. So there's many rare diseases where we understand the science, the genetic basis, natural history. The science is progressing, the understanding is progressing. And therefore, that risk-benefit equation has changed and is now in the conversation when we're thinking about investing dollars. I mean, like any company, we have limited investment. Pfizer is, among the world's largest pharmaceutical companies. We invest, nearly $7 billion in R&D. We can't do it alone. No one can. We all need to be part of this together. But even within that $7 billion, there's great scientific ideas and research that we can't fund. And we look at great unmet need areas across oncology and cardiovascular disease, obesity. There's so many areas of unmet need. Rare disease clearly fits in that mix now. But the ability for us to look at our portfolio and say, well, I'm going to invest in, if I have a 2 or 3% chance of success from first in human versus a 10% chance for an oncology drug, well, I'm going to invest in my 10% chance of success because there's a great unmet need there and there's a need for innovation. We're now at the point, we actually just did a study, a benchmarking study with a third party where we looked at what are the benchmarks for every phase of development, starting with phase 1, 2A, 2B, 3, registration into launch of a product. And what we found is in a lot of areas, rare diseases are more successful. In some areas, they're less successful, but they're in the mix. It's 5 to 10%. Sometimes if it's a biologic, maybe a little over 10%, chance of success that when you enter a product in first in human, that you're going to get registered and approved in a single market. So still a very low chance of success, but it's on par. So I think that is the real reason that rare disease is now in the conversation where we try to invest. So there's 7,000 rare diseases. How does Pfizer pick, where we can do our part? And the first thing we did is we took a look and said, okay, well, there's a separate business unit in Pfizer on oncology. We take that business unit and those diseases out because that business unit covers them very well. That leaves us about half of the rare diseases of 3,500. Next, we really did a very rigorous, it took 4, 5, 6 months. We had external help. We had a lot of expertise across the Pfizer colleagues to really look at where does the science and the regulatory, where has that really been de-risked enough that we think that, again, to that earlier in terms of where we make investment, where has it been de-risked enough that we think we can invest in and be successful? And let's match that with where our capabilities are. Our capabilities in protein misfolding and chaperone technology are capabilities that are in the field today. Both, we have a lot of hematology and pulmonologists and neuroscience. I mean, they're the areas that Pfizer has a foundation in. So we have presence in, nearly 100 countries globally with expertise, medical affairs and sales individuals and infrastructure in countries with expertise. So where can we take those 7,000 down to the 3,500 and leverage our expertise? So we looked at, and this was a very iterative process for us. We looked at the science, we looked at the diseases well categorized, do we understand the pathophysiology of the disease? Are there any current studies, or even very early science, established animal models? Are there biomarkers? Are there druggable targets? Are there natural history studies? You don't have to, if they're written in, there's journals about it. We don't have to check every box, but is there enough there that says, okay, there's a good technical chance of success? And from a regulatory point of view, we all know that the guidelines are evolving and they're becoming more and more favorable to flexibility. I don't think we're where we need to be, but we're certainly evolving in the right direction in terms of flexibility. And I think the FDA Safety and Innovation Act, or FDASIA, or PDUFA 5, whatever you want to call it is clearly getting us in the direction of more and more flexibility, and by involving the patient perspective at times of risk. And every time there's a decision process in terms of a risk point of view. So we looked at where the science was and where the regulations was, and can we have an endpoint? Do we think we can be successful? One slide I'll share with you. I don't have very many slides, but to your left, you can see this curve, and you can see the curve as it goes up over time. About 7, 8 years ago, we knew the genetic basis for about 1,000 diseases. Fast forward 7 years, and now we know the genetic basis for nearly 3,000 diseases. There's multiple government, industry, consortium you can see there on your right that are focused on discovering the genetic basis of the disease. Now, that doesn't always, as those of you who know have been in drug development, just understanding the basis is a great start. You have to have a target. But that doesn't translate as easy as we always thought to creating a therapy. But that understanding is a foundation. And I look at one example, Forge Canada, that is discovering about one a week. Last year they discovered 51 genetic bases of disease. So that's one of those groups on that list. One a week they're discovering the genetic basis of a new disease. So that clearly is just an example. I think if we look at a regulatory example over time, and you can see, back in 2006, the percentage of approvals that were in the rare disease space as compared to where it's trending towards now in the high 30s, getting, last year or 2 years ago approaching 40%. But clearly more and more products are getting approved. If I think of open models, one area that we, after looking at the science and the regulators, we looked at the open models for collaboration, because the ability for us to share information, the ability for us to be more efficient in drug development, to share risk and benefit is a mind shift in terms of development. So, here's an example across the spectrum of partnerships that Pfizer has entered in just over the last few years. You can see here represented, there's other pharma companies, smaller pharma companies, academia, government agencies, non-for-profits, advocacy organizations. These are important and critical elements for us to accelerate the speed, given that sense of urgency, really accelerate development. One example I'll just highlight, I could really talk about all of these, but glycomimetics for sickle cell. I think you heard yesterday, we've understood the genetic basis for sickle cell for over 50 years and there's no therapy. Well, we're just ending, through our partnership with glycomimetics, a product in development for acute crisis associated with sickle cell disease, ending phase 2. And we hope to enter phase 3 sometime, the end of this year, early next year. And we think of that partnership where Pfizer, given its global reach, its ability to manufacture and simplify manufacturing, and license that product from glycomimetics, that funding that we provided, that licensing, then there enables glycomimetics to fund their earlier programs in their pipeline and other disease areas. So clearly it's a great symbiotic relationship between Pfizer and glycomimetics, and there's multiple examples in here that were discussed yesterday. So when we did all that, when we looked at the science, the risk of science, the regulatory understanding, the partnerships, we got that 3,500 down to under 100. And then we really looked at where are the diseases that have a high unmet need, high morbidity, mortality, those that impact children, those that have a moderate prevalence, because they're where we really can make a difference. One of the areas, just to close on unmet need, because I think we all need to be reminded of this. Over the last 6 weeks, we've had 2 events that were an integration of outside patient groups and advocacy with Pfizer individuals. The first event we had, or the most recent event we had, was the first week of March, where we spent a day with 4 patient groups, where we listened to a woman who had sarcoidosis, a young woman, vibrant, and she described it as, I look fine, but I'm not fine. I've had, heart attacks and strokes and multiple kind of cardiovascular events because of sarcoidosis. We talked and understood Huntington's better, Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, and sickle cell disease. A week prior to that was Rare Disease Day, and we had Parent Project Muscular Dystrophy we hosted, and we heard from the leader, Kim Galbraith, a leader of Parent Project Muscular Dystrophy, as well as 2 moms of patients. And I think one of the moms can really sum up, so we never lose that patient perspective of unmet need. And if you can indulge me for a few minutes, if we can show the video. It's about a 4-minute video, so hopefully you can hang in there. I think it's very compelling.